Case File 01987. November 22, 1987. Chicago, Illinois. 9:14 p.m. A live sports broadcast is interrupted. For 15 seconds, viewers see a masked figure. Then the signal returns to normal. 2 hours later, it happens again on a different channel. This time for 90 seconds. The masked figure speaks, behaves erratically, disappears. The FBI is called. The Federal Communications Commission launches an investigation. They will search for years. They will follow every possible lead. And they will never identify who did it. This is the story of the Max Headroom broadcast intrusion. Welcome to Shadow Files. To understand this mystery, we need to understand the world of 1987. This was the peak of the analog broadcast era. Television signals were transmitted through the air using powerful microwave equipment. Cable was still growing. Streaming didn't exist. If you wanted to reach millions of people at once, you had one main way to do it. You had to control a broadcast signal. And that required expensive equipment, technical knowledge, and access to broadcast towers. Hijacking a television signal was not something a random person could do. It required someone with real skills. Someone who knew how the technology worked. Someone who had access to powerful transmission equipment. And someone who was willing to break federal laws to do something almost no one had ever done before. The city of Chicago in 1987 was home to some of the most powerful television stations in the United States. WGN-TV was one of the largest independent stations in the country. WTTW was the local public broadcasting station. Both stations transmitted their signals from tall antenna towers, using microwave links to relay their broadcasts. This is important because microwave links were vulnerable to a specific kind of attack. If someone knew what they were doing, they could override the signal being sent to the transmitter. And that is exactly what happened on the night of November 22, 1987. At 9:14 p.m., viewers of WGN-TV were watching the 9 o'clock news. The sports anchor was giving highlights of a Bears football game. Suddenly, the screen went black. Then it flickered to life with a strange image. A person wearing a plastic Max Headroom mask was standing in front of a corrugated metallic panel that was rotating behind them. Max Headroom was a popular fictional character at that time. He was a computer-generated TV host with a distinctive look. Slick hair, sunglasses, robotic voice. He appeared in commercials and had his own TV show. The mask being used by the hijacker was clearly meant to look like this character. But there was no audio, just silent movement. The figure swayed back and forth, nodded, made strange gestures, for 15 to 30 seconds. Then WGN engineers regained control of their signal. The image vanished. The news broadcast returned. The sports anchor recovered quickly. He made a small joke about the interruption, then continued his report. Most viewers were confused. Some assumed it was a technical glitch. Others thought maybe it was part of the show. But behind the scenes, WGN engineers were panicking. They knew immediately that this was not a random glitch. Someone had deliberately overridden their broadcast signal. Someone had hijacked their live transmission. WGN engineers used a technical response. They switched to a different microwave frequency to prevent the hijacker from continuing. Within about 30 seconds, they had regained full control. The intrusion was over. The hijacker had failed to complete their broadcast. But they were not done for the night. 2 hours later, at 11:15 p.m., viewers of WTTW were watching an episode of the British science fiction show Doctor Who. Specifically, an episode called Horror of Fong Rock. Suddenly, without warning, the same masked figure appeared on their screens. But this time, the intrusion lasted much longer. Almost 90 seconds. And this time, there was audio. The masked figure spoke. Their voice was distorted, possibly to disguise their identity. They made bizarre statements. They referenced current events. They mentioned WGN by name, apparently taunting the earlier failed intrusion. They imitated sports commentator Chuck Swirsky, mocking him. They quoted commercial jingles. They picked up items and displayed them to the camera. At one point, they lowered their pants and were spanked by another person wearing a French-made costume. The entire performance was strange, unsettling, and completely unauthorized. WTTW engineers scrambled to regain control. They struggled because the hijacker was overriding a different microwave link than WGN had used. Eventually, after 90 seconds, the signal returned to normal. Doctor Who resumed. The audience was left staring at their screens in confusion. The FBI was contacted immediately. The Federal Communications Commission opened a formal investigation. This was not a prank that could be ignored. Hijacking a television signal was a serious federal crime. It carried potential penalties of up to $100,000 in fines and years in prison. But before they could punish anyone, they had to find them. The investigation began with the technical evidence. FCC engineers analyzed the intrusions in detail. They determined that the hijacker had used extremely powerful equipment. To override WGN signal, they would have needed a microwave transmitter more powerful than the one WGN was using. This was expensive equipment, not something you could buy at an electronics store. It suggested access to broadcast industry resources. The hijacker also demonstrated technical knowledge. They knew which microwave frequencies each station used. They knew where the microwave links were located. They knew when WGN would switch frequencies during their response. This suggested inside information about broadcast operations, possibly someone who worked in the industry. The location was another clue. To override a microwave link, the hijacker had to be physically located between the studio and the receiving antenna. This meant they were somewhere in the Chicago area, likely on a rooftop or elevated location. The FBI investigated buildings along the transmission paths. They interviewed engineers, technicians, and broadcast workers. They followed up on tips from the public. Some suggested former employees who had grievances. Some pointed to hacker groups active in the 1980s. Some suggested rival broadcasters. The Max Headroom mask itself became a clue. Investigators tracked down where the mask had been sold. There were only certain retail locations that carried it. They looked at credit card records. They interviewed store employees. But too many masks had been sold. It was impossible to narrow down the specific buyer. The corrugated metallic panel that rotated behind the hijacker was another lead. It appeared to be a piece of industrial equipment, but it was a common enough material that it could have come from anywhere. The clothing worn by the hijacker was standard. The French-made outfit worn by their accomplice was also easily available. Every physical clue led to a dead end. The behavior in the video was analyzed by profilers. The hijacker was clearly intelligent. They referenced pop culture in specific ways. They made political and social jokes that suggested awareness of current events. They spoke with what seemed like a mixture of humor and hostility. But the profile could match many different types of people. It didn't lead to a specific suspect. Over the years, many theories emerged about who might have been responsible. One theory pointed to disgruntled former employees of Chicago area broadcast stations. Someone with technical knowledge, inside information, and a grudge against the industry could have carried out the intrusion. Several people were investigated. None were ever charged. Another theory suggested a hacker group. In the 1980s, technology enthusiasts and phone hackers were an active subculture. Some groups were known to pull elaborate pranks on media and technology companies. But no group ever publicly claimed responsibility. If it was done by a hacker group, they kept their secret perfectly. Some believed it was an inside job at WGN or WTTW itself. An employee who wanted to embarrass their employer. Someone with legitimate access to the equipment. Someone who could carry out the intrusion without being immediately caught. Multiple current and former employees were interviewed. All were cleared. There were also theories that it was politically motivated, that the hijacker was trying to send a specific message about media control, censorship, or corporate power. The strange content of the broadcast could have been symbolic. But if there was a hidden message, it was never decoded. In 2010, more than 20 years after the incident, a person online claimed to know who was responsible. They described two brothers who had allegedly carried out the intrusion. They provided specific details that seemed to match, but the story could never be confirmed. The alleged perpetrators, if they existed, never came forward. The FBI never made an arrest based on this information. The case has been kept open by the FBI, but active investigation has essentially stopped. Too much time has passed. Too many leads have gone cold. The hijacker, whoever they were, has succeeded in one of the most remarkable feats of anonymous public performance in history. They committed a federal crime in front of millions of viewers on two different television stations in one of the largest cities in America, and they got away with it completely. The Max Headroom broadcast intrusion of 1987 has become a legend in internet culture. The recording of the WTTW intrusion still circulates online today. New generations discover it. They watch the strange masked figure. They listen to the distorted voice. They see the bizarre performance. And they ask the same questions the FBI asked in 1987. Who was this person? What were they trying to say? And why did they do it? Some cases are solved through good detective work. Some are solved through luck. Some are solved through confessions decades later. But some cases are never solved. Not because the evidence has been destroyed. Not because the criminals have died. But because the criminals were smart enough, careful enough, and patient enough to disappear completely into the anonymity they created. The masked figure of the Max Headroom incident is out there somewhere. They watched their intrusion on the news the next day. They followed the FBI investigation. They saw themselves become an internet legend. They know exactly who they are. They know exactly what they did. And they have chosen to keep it that way. Forever. Case File 1987. The Max Headroom broadcast intrusion. 2 TV stations. 90 seconds of chaos. 1 masked figure. 0 identifications. This file remains open. Because some cases don't end with confessions. They end with the criminal watching from the shadows, satisfied with what they got away with. See you in the next file.